The year 1945. The devastating raids on the German city of Dresden near the end of World War II. For 2 years, a young Kiwi mosquito pilot, among a select few, using top-secret technology to help rain terror on German targets with pinpoint accuracy from 30,000 feet.
That tie you're wearing, what does that mean to you?
That is the tie. That is Pathfinder's, thank you very much. Because each of those little eagles is a pair of wings, and that was the Pathfinder badge which we wore on the lapel of our jacket.
I'm proud to this day.
Hmm?
Proud to this day.
Oh, too bloody right.
But his first overseas posting, less than glorious, the rookie pilot's sent to Singapore, now under attack from the Japanese.
4 hours after the first invasion wave, Singapore is bombed.
He arrived to find few planes to fly, no air force to combat the Japanese attacks.
Within 24 hours, the air over Malaya and Singapore is controlled by the Japanese. The blow to British morale is tremendous.
As a result of that, the station commander, Papa Watts, took it upon was his fault, because he was in charge. So, fine old bloke, he shot himself. So, the ads cleaned up the body and that sort of thing, but I was called by the ads to pack up all the groupie's personal gear and also unload his revolver.
With no planes, no flying operations, he sought orders from his new commanding officer.
His response to that was, "What? You're not supposed to be here. All air crew are supposed to be evacuated. Good morning."
3 days later, he was evacuated by sea, missing the surrender of Singapore. But not the fury of the Japanese, his ship bombed, waiting for a naval escort.
We got an abandoned ship signal at one time, and bloody island was a long way away, wasn't it? Because the lifeboats had all been blown to smithereens. 30-odd injured, I think, and there's 2 dead. And it was feeling when they were let go off the plank over the side. That was, I'd heard about death and all the rest of it, but seeing them go like that is, well, I didn't like it.
He was posted to the RAF in England, landing a cushy job as an instructor. But the Kiwi felt uncomfortable with that, asking to be transferred to an operational squadron.
Guilty conscience or something, I don't know what you call it. I felt I hadn't done my share, and I also felt that I couldn't go home and say I hadn't done with all the blokes who had got chopped. I just thought I had to do it.
Mosquitoes airborne.
As it happened, the fact that I got Bomber Command mosquitoes turned out to be all to my good, because our casualties weren't very high.
He'd become part of a squadron using top-secret technology called oboe, using radio signals that sounded like the musical instrument.
It was just, what they could do is just plain fantastic. It wasn't even made public after the war finished, till a long, long time. up until about middle of 42, when Obo was about to go, if they got bombs within 5 miles of target, miles, not 100 yards, 5 miles of target, that's where most of them went. And in other words, all that early bombing was doing no good at all.
But Obo changed that. The blind bombing targeting system consisted of 2 ground stations sending radio signals to the aircraft. One signal, called the CAT, plotted the position of the aircraft. The other, the mouse, plotted the bomb release time to the last second.
If you went one side, you got a dot. If you went the other side, you got a dash. And a dot was 1/9 the length of a dash. So if you add 1 and 9 together, you get 10, and 10 was the whole number, which meant you got a steady beam in your earphones. And that's what we aim for 10 minutes from calling in time, which we got from base, and they knew what we're up to all the way to target, and they told us when to drop.
They dropped marker bombs, brightly illuminating the target for hundreds of heavy bombers behind. For the Pathfinder pilots, expectations were high.
The aim was 0 error. If you got outside 300 yards, you weren't any good. If they thought you were worthy of further training, you got further training. But if they didn't, they scrubbed you from Obo.
Keith flew 52 ops, including over the Ruhr, Essen, Dusseldorf, Dresden, Cologne, Hamburg, and eventually Berlin itself.
It was a total war where nations were at war, not just the armed forces.
John Nickel, a retired RAF flight lieutenant and military commentator, says it's easy to forget just how desperate those times were.
People talk about whether the attacks on the industrial heartland of Germany were either legal or honest or decent or alongside the rule of war. In actual fact, you have to look at it in quite a different way. We can't look at it with the hindsight of 75 or so years. You have to look at it at what people were thinking at the time, and this was total war.
Keith had dropped his markers from as high as 30,000 feet, way above the clouds. It was only at war's end he was able to fly much lower to survey the carnage.
The colour of the centre of Kassel turned slowly into completely black. And as we got there, the whole of the centre of Kassel was burnt out. There was a ring of, I presume, houses or whatever the buildings were, but inside that was completely gone.
He would later see the destruction from the ground in Hamburg.
A mile after mile, there was no footpaths, no houses, no nothing. Mile after mile of Hamburg was like that.
72 years have passed. He's older, wiser, and living without qualms. But he still has that steely resolve he needed all those years ago.
Is there a pang of conscience?
No, they shot at us, didn't they? They shot down a hell of a lot of heavies there too. So, no, they started it all.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.